Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the kind invitation. And I only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to talk fast. America is still a place of dreams. And that's what attracts so many people here. And it's wonderful that our Creator gave us the ability to dream, because dreams are sometimes the only thing that carry people through the dark times. I want to thank everybody who's here for the dreams that you had to go into public service and to be of help to your fellow man. It's not something that everybody's willing to do. Now, when a lot of people told me what I should talk about when I came here, they said, Latino elected officials, you need to talk about immigration. Well, that's like when I go and speak to an African American group and they say, you need to talk about government entitlements. Give me a break. People have, a vast variety of things that they're interested in. And to pigeonhole people into one area, I think indicates something more about the person who's doing the pigeonholing, and it's not a good thing. We always tend to be so superficial as a society. I remember I was having an interview on NPR, and the interviewer said, Dr. Carson, I notice you don't talk about race very often. Why is that? And I said, it's because I'm a neurosurgeon. And she looked at me with a quizzical look. And I said, you see, when I take someone to the operating room and I cut the scalp and peel it down and take off the bone flap and open the dura, I'm operating on the thing that makes that person who they are. The skin doesn't make them who they are. The hair doesn't make them who they are. The brain makes them who they are. And it's something that we must start, as Americans, looking at much more carefully, doing a deep analysis rather than just being superficial. And also, the thing that I think threatens to destroy us almost quicker than anything else as a nation is division. We're allowing the purveyors of division to come into our midst and to make us think that we're each other's enemies. So you have people who will come in and try to tell you that there's a war on women, there's racial wars, there's age wars, there's income wars, there's religious wars, there's a war on virtually everything. And that can only occur if we, the people, are foolish enough to allow that to happen. Because the fact of the matter is, our strength lies in our unity. And we're all in the same boat. And we need to understand that so we can move beyond superficial things and deal with the major problems that affect us as a society. We, the American people, are not each other's enemies. It's the people who are trying to divide us who are the enemies. And the sooner we recognize that, the better off we're going to be. Because there are people on the outside, like radical Islamic jihadists, who wish to destroy us and our way of life. So why should we make it easier for them by trying to destroy each other? And I think the sooner we recognize that, the better off we're going to be. Also, education is the great divide in our nation. It is, if you have a good education, it doesn't matter what your ethnic background is. It doesn't matter what your economic background is. You get to write your own ticket. That was something that my mother understood. She was only able to cobble together up to a third grade education in rural Tennessee, where she was one of 24 children, got shuffled from home to home, finally got married at age 13, trying to escape from all of that. But realizing that she didn't have much of an education and thus not many opportunities, she really pushed us, my brother and me, to really get an education. We weren't very good students, I must admit. We were horrible students. I was probably the worst student you've ever saw in your life. But because she made us read books, which I didn't like very much, by the way, but back in those days, you had to do what your parents told you. So, I was reading those books, and as I started reading, even though we were desperately poor, between the covers of those books, I could go anywhere, I could be anybody, I could do anything. It made such an incredible difference. I started knowing things that no one else knew, and in the space of a year and a half, I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class. The same students who used to call me dummy in the 5th grade were coming to me in the 7th grade saying, Benny, how do you work this problem? And I'd say, sit at my feet, youngster, while I instruct you. I was perhaps a little obnoxious, but it sure felt good to say that to those turkeys. But, I just had a very different impression of who I was. And even at a high school that wasn't known for academics in inner city Detroit, I still got what I needed because I realized that if I was going to get a good education, it was up to me. And a lot of times the teachers weren't able to teach what they were planning to teach because they spent the whole hour disciplining people. I would make it my business to go back after school and ask them, what were you planning to teach today? And they were so delighted to see me come back. And I got a lot of extra tutoring, and they directed me to all kinds of programs throughout the city. And I got what I needed to go from inner city high school in Detroit to Yale University. But it required understanding that the responsibility was my own. And that is such an important concept for us to get across to all of our young people today. Because there are those out there who want to tell everybody that they're a victim of society, and that somebody else is in control of their destiny. But what I learned from reading those books is that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you. You get to make the decisions. You get to decide how much energy you want to put behind it. And I guarantee you, you take any child and you get him to understand that, you're going to have a person who will be successful. It doesn't matter where they come from. The other thing we have to keep in mind, the other thing we have to recognize in this nation is that we are a nation of values and principles. And we've been so busy in recent years giving away all of our values and principles for the sake of political correctness that we no longer even know who we are. And we've allowed the family structures to be denigrated and been told that any kind of family is okay. There is no standard here. And I don't have anything against people who want to do things in an alternative way, but I do have a problem with people who try to denigrate things that have worked very well for a long period of time and have led to an uplifted society. And you look at American society. This nation declared its independence in 1776. In less than 100 years, it was the #1 economic power in the world. It was because we created an environment that encouraged entrepreneurial risk-taking and capital investment. Those are the things that drive an economic engine. Those things are so important for this country right now. We, since 1850 until 2000, had an annual economic growth rate of 3.3% on average. Since 2001, we've been growing at a 1.8% rate. In the last quarter, we actually shrunk. This is not a good situation for anybody. And we have to be smart enough to look back and ask ourselves, what are the factors that created that tremendous economic growth? How do we loose that tremendous economic engine so that it can work well once again? Well, there's a whole litany of things, and it would take me more than 15 minutes to talk about it, but I will tell you just some simple, easy things. There's over $2 trillion worth of American cash overseas which is not being brought back to this country because of our excessively high corporate tax rates, the highest in the developed world. I can remember sitting around a corporate board table many afternoons. I've been in corporate America for decades, talking about what are we going to do with all this money overseas. Well, what I would propose is a 6-month tax hiatus to be able to repatriate that money, and my only stipulation would be that 10% of it would have to be used to create jobs for those who are unemployed and on welfare, and to do research into job creation. You want to talk about an economic stimulus that costs the American taxpayer not one penny. That would be the way to do it. And then, the number of, and lower the tax rate, of course, so that it's commensurate with everybody else, so we don't drive business out of here. We bring business back in. And we have to have the kinds of regulations that keep a lot of evil from happening. Our founder said, if men were angels, no government would be needed. But we know men are not angels. Neither are women. But so we do need some degree of regulation. There's no question about that. But we don't need government encircling every aspect of our lives, business, industry, academia, with tons of regulations, so that as soon as somebody doesn't cooperate, you just pull the noose on them and strangle them. That is not the ideal that we had in mind for this nation. And then leadership, another area. Our nation is the pinnacle nation in the world, and yet we've withdrawn from the leadership of the world, and we've created a vacuum. And other people are filling that vacuum, and they're not necessarily good people who are benign in their intentions. And the longer we neglect taking a leadership role, the more lives and the more money it's going to cost us. And, it leads me to a degree to immigration, because I can't completely leave that off. But the reason that I think that we need to seal our borders completely, all of our borders, north, south, east, and west, is not so much because I'm afraid of somebody from Honduras. I'm afraid of somebody from Syria who wants to bomb us, who wants to do bad things. So that's the main reason that we need to seal all of our borders. But in the meantime, we do have an illegal immigration problem that would be solved if you seal the borders and you cease the benefits so that people wouldn't see a reason to come here. However, as a compassionate nation and compassionate people, we should be asking, what can we do to help the people in nations who feel that they don't have an opportunity in their nation? In Cameroon right now, there are American companies who have noticed that there are thousands, millions of acres of fertile land. And they're going over there and helping to develop that land to produce produce, creating jobs and money in Cameroon, but also they're benefiting from it. We can use that same type of model to help develop all of the nations in this hemisphere. And then everybody can be prosperous. That's what we need to be looking at, ways that we can share the wealth and still maintain our borders, maintain our integrity. Now, that will stop the influx of people, there's no question. But what about the 11 million people who are still here? What do you do with them? Well, many of them have never known any other country. So where are you going to send them? So I don't think that that's necessarily a good idea. But what we should do, I believe, is provide them a way that they don't have to hide in the shadows. Give them an opportunity to become guest workers. They have to register. They have to enroll in a back tax program. And if they want to become citizens, they have to get in the line with everybody else and do what's necessary, because we have to pay homage to the people who've done it the right way. And to slap them in the face and say, we don't care about you, that's not fair either. So we have to do things that are fair to everyone. And if we use that general philosophy, recognizing that the people who came here across the border, they weren't coming here to be Democrats or Republicans. They're coming here to try to improve their quality of life. And we need to understand that. And our policies need to understand that. But our policies also need to recognize that we are a sovereign nation, that we do have rules. We do want people to abide by those rules. And if we keep those two things in mind, I think it becomes very easy to do things the right way. And bottom line is, we're all in the same boat. And if part of the boat sinks, eventually the rest of it goes down also. And we must also recognize that we are a nation of values and principles. We are a Judeo-Christian nation. And I know our president says we're not, but I don't think he gets to decide what kind of nation we are. I think the people get to decide what kind of nation we are. And we are the ones who get to inculcate those values into our children and never give them away. And recognize that when people tell you that we don't believe in God in this country, tell them they can only speak for themselves. I was in a public debate with a very famous evolutionist in Hollywood, and he thinks that anybody who believes in God is a total moron and an idiot. And he made that very clear. And at the end of the debate, I said, I think you win, because you've convinced me. You see, I believe I came from God. You believe you came from a monkey, and I think you're right. But, the bottom line is we do have to be willing to engage in conversation. And as far as God is concerned, the founding document of this nation, our Declaration of Independence, talks about certain inalienable rights given to us by our Creator, a.k.a. God. The Pledge of Allegiance to our flag says we are one nation under God. Many courtrooms on the wall, it says, in God we trust. Every coin in our pocket, every bill in our wallet says, in God we trust. So if it's in our founding documents, it's in our pledges, in our courts, and it's on our money, but we're not supposed to talk about it, what in the world is that? In medicine, we call it schizophrenia. And doesn't that explain a lot of what's going on in our nation today? And we need to make it perfectly clear that it's okay to live by godly principles of loving your fellow man, of caring about your neighbor, of developing your God-given talents to the utmost so that you become valuable to the people around you, of having values and principles that govern your life. And if we do that, not only will we remain a pinnacle nation, but we will truly have one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and thank you for what you do for the people.